welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich, also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
All rise, get your booty on the floor tonight. Make my... All rise, we're in court, not a disco. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Dredd presiding. Tonight I am your defense attorney, Mr. Mark Radulich, your mandated reporter, and frankly I'm mortified. And on the docket, the 1998 Matthew Broderick monster vehicle. It's not Jurassic Park, but it might as well have been. It's not Zilla, though that's what people call it. For God's sakes, it's Godzilla. Whoa. They say it's got to go because it sucks. But we're going to defend it anyway. But I'm not alone. I've got a prosecuting attorney here to tell you all the things that are terrible about it. Ladies and gentlemen, he's Sean, you're not.
Hello, my majestic jet bears. Welcome to court. What in the world could possibly make me want to briefly tune out opening night of Stage 3 of Overwatch League? Why, of course, it's talking about easily one of the very, 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 very worst of the Godzilla movies, the flick that almost killed the property. Mark insisted he wanted to defend it. You can imagine how hard I fought him on this.
Defend it, I will.
This is going to be a rarity because, as I told Mark before the show, normally I have this big historical note section and then I break it down into something super analytical. Well, tonight I have to do things a little bit differently because actually all the fascinating stuff about the history of this movie, which, by the way, I'm going to take a brief moment to plug the hilarious Matt McMuscles on YouTube. One of his most recent episodes of his series, What Happened, focused for 20 minutes on absolutely every little thing that went wrong with this movie. And it was revelatory stuff that I had no idea went down. I strongly recommend giving his channel a look because he's absolutely hilarious. If any of you out there are big video game Let's Play fans, you might recognize him as one of the members of the sadly now defunct Super Best Friend Zaibatsu. But his channel is just loads of laughs. I have it on all the time while I'm working. But anyway, the main takeaways that I'm going to say before we really get started here are that you have to keep in mind this was released on May 20th, 1998. Before marketing, and I stress this came in before the marketing budget. This movie cost somewhere between, depending on who you ask, $130 and $150 million. I want you to keep that figure in mind because it is going to become important in my case. It grossed right around $50 million on its opening weekend and proceeded to do around $300 million worldwide, which marked it as, by industry standards, pretty much an unequivocal failure. And as far as the critical stuff that we like to talk about occasionally, currently, as of my most recent research, sits at a 16% on Rotten Tomatoes and hovering around a 28% on Metacritic. Fucking yikes. So I'm going to give you a chance before I launch into my prosecution, Mark. Give me briefly, why were you so insistent that you wanted to defend this?
I think because if this film were, and this is part of my defense, but I think if this movie were was named anything else, if this were just, Monster Iguana, if it were Ham Sandwich, anything but Godzilla, I don't think as many. I mean, it might still have be a critical disaster, but I don't think many of the average movie-going fans would have hated it. There's often a split between the critical consensus and fan consensus, all things being equal. I think the general movie-going public likes to see monsters destroy cities, and they don't really care about the human characters, and they're not analyzing the film from a craft perspective. They're analyzing it from an entertainment. Analyze would be a strong word here. They are experiencing it from an entertainment perspective, and that is where I feel like the film is unfairly marred. There are obviously problems with it. It's not a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination, and some of the critical criticisms I think are spot on. But I don't think it's the disaster that everybody claims it is. I think it just shouldn't have been called Godzilla.
Okay, with that in mind, I'm going to start my case by asking you a question, and feel free to answer honestly. Who would you think would be the one that probably deserves the most blame for the absolute drubbing this movie has been given in the past 21 years?
I mean, I would assume this has to start with probably the pre-production team. You know, your screenwriters, Roland Emmerich, the producers. They're essentially the ones that drew up the draft, the blueprint. Fuck me, the blueprint. For what this thing would eventually become. I mean, the actors come and do their jobs, and, you know, some give better performances than others, but ultimately this is the director's vision. The producers have their say in their notes, and this had to be written by somebody.
Okay. Well, you're not wrong. You're not entirely wrong there, but if you really want to go back to the very first seed, you have to tip a cap and raise a finger to, at the time, longtime Toho distributor Henry Saperstein. He was the one who, circa the mid-90s, finally convinced, right around 1996 we're talking, convinced Toho to finally license out Godzilla to a North American producer after Toho had released their surprisingly well-received Godzilla vs. Mothra reboot. And again, he had been trying for years to get them to expand Godzilla's reach, to bring him overseas. The first studios he tried, Columbia and TriStar, respectively, noped right out. It was Sony that finally took up the project, and, ironically enough, pegged their own studio, TriStar, to produce it. So TriStar said no. The offer instead went up to their parent company. Their parent company said yes, and said, "You will make this and like it." Okay, even then, for a while there was hope. Because initially this was not going to be directed by Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin. They, at the time of Stargate fame, and I believe... Hang on, gotta check a date real quick, because I don't always get everything written down that I should. Yes. Right around this time, yes, Independence Day had, in fact, made a huge fucking bank at the box office. But they were not attached to this yet. At the time, this was going to be helmed by what would have been first-time director Jan de Bont, who actually had what, at the time, sounded like a pretty encouraging idea. He wanted it to be a fairly standard Godzilla movie, one that was big on mythos and fantasy, as the most beloved Japanese takes are. It was going to see him in a climactic battle with an undersea creature called the Griffin. And overall seemed like it could be money in the bank. They even got legendary special effects demigod Stan Winston to come on board for a redesign of Godzilla himself. He was going to do the effects, but the problem was he and Sony came to an impasse over his proposed $120 million budget. Now again, I'm going to backtrack. This thing ultimately cost somewhere between 130 and 150 million before the marketing. Before the big bus signs, before the Taco Bell ads, before Jimmy Page and Puff Daddy made everything blow up in Godzilla's face with the power of rock and shitty rap. This was already going to cost. This already ended up costing 130 to 150 million before all of that. But they balked on giving a first-time director and Hollywood's name among effects artists 120 million. Whatever. To a certain extent, he was a rookie. That's almost understandable. Although he would ultimately go on to make huge fucking bank himself when he directed Speed, but that's none of my business. Hang on, gotta sit in my tea. And by tea, I mean orange vanilla Coke Zero. So the next people they brought on were finally after Roland and Dean said no twice, saying that they thought the whole concept was, quote, dopey. They finally came on board to co-direct once they were given total creative control. Remember that. It's going to hurt. Ultimately, Devlin and Emmerich threw out the original script, which, by the way, was penned by two of the people who would go on to write the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, womp womp. Because, and again, I shit you not here, Roland didn't like the concept of two monsters fighting it out. No, I'm not kidding. They didn't want to do a traditional Godzilla fantasy. They wanted to do the whole American thing and make it super grounded and gritty and realer than all the reels. They threw out Stan Winston's designs. Yeah, because fuck Industrial Light and Magic, am I right? Instead, they brought on another fairly experienced effect artist, creature creator and eventual Underworld sequel director and face-off judge, Patrick Tatopoulos. Now, that's not going to sound familiar to a lot of people, except maybe super impressive movie nerd Andrew Graham. But at the time, the most notable blips on his resume were the fact that he had worked on Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola, which, okay, fair play. Visually, that was fantastic. The makeup effects on that were brilliant. But in addition to that, there's another movie you might know him for. Fucking Super fucking Mario fucking Brothers. Fuck me sideways. You handed Godzilla to the Super Mario Brothers guy. You handed him to the guy who made the Goombas. And oh boy, did he have an interesting opinion of Stan Winston's designs. I want you to keep in mind what I am about to say in, yes, what some will probably call an offensive mock-up of his ridiculous European accent because I'm a huge Face-Off fan. Oh boy, what he had to say about Stan Winston's work. Oh dear Lord, the hungamongas on this guy. What they did, which was a mistake in my mind, was rather than going in a new direction, they tried to alter and make the old one better. Yes, that's the start of it. And when you do that, first of all, I think it's very disrespectful. It's more disrespectful for me to alter something existing than to take a fresh new direction. Okay, you Tommy Wiseau sounding dipshit. I hope you one day reflect on that quote, preferably while you are Googling stills of what you did to the Goombas. You somehow took a low-level minion from a Super Mario Brothers game that already looked like a micro-penis and somehow made it look more absurd and offensive. The next time I watch Face Off, I'm going to scream at the screen when you criticize some contestant's makeup, Super Mario Brothers. You did Super Mario Brothers and Zilla. You don't get to talk about anything ever. You don't get to tell a Subway sandwich artist how to make your meatball sub. Because the blood of Super Mario Brothers and Godzilla are on your hands. Eventually, they showed the early creature designs to Toho brass to convince them to sign off on the movie. Reportedly, they sat there for several long minutes in total silence, just staring at this. And they then asked if they could reconvene later. And evidently the opinion was that they couldn't really afford to delay this much longer. They had to get this thing into production, so they couldn't afford to make any more big changes. So they just went ahead and just said fuck it and signed off on it. This was at the time when the supernova summer blockbusters ruled the earth. This was, it was easily the tail end of the Schwarzenegger prime. It was the salad days of Will Smith. And the best cast they could pull together for this movie to compete with all of that, with all these huge bankable stars, they threw together Jean Reno, who, okay, I love The Professional, but come on. Ferris Bueller and a big chunk of The Simpsons for a Godzilla movie. For a Godzilla movie made by Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin. The people who done brung you Independence Day and Stargate. Okay. Oh, by the way, more good news, everyone. You've got a year for production and post-production. A year when CGI was still in its infancy. Just, again, chew on it. They gave them a year to flesh all of this out. The marketing budget was everywhere. I would love to know what that jacked the final budget for this whole fiasco up to. It was edited up to the very, very, very last minute, and what we ultimately got was a kaiju movie where something we are supposed to accept as Godzilla spends most of his time running away in fear from the little screaming McNuggets with legs. Japan makes big fuck-off monsters that just decide that Tokyo is going to be their playpen. America somehow has this thing about not being able to accept the possibility that a monster might look at our military might and give us the finger. The beast has to be afraid of our guns and our missiles and our tanks and our piss up a Roland. And you know what? That's exactly what it is. That's a big complaint that a lot of people have about AMC's The Walking Dead, the first couple seasons anyway, is that, well, especially the first season, is because the budget for the show was so tight. Oftentimes, what you got was a show about dirty, filthy rednecks talking about being scared of zombies. But pretty light on the actual zombies. Well, in this movie, it's more like a weird combination of that and what Michael Bay thought made a good Transformers movie. Let's not focus on the monster. No. We are not to care about the monster. No, instead, let's just put our attention on this flaccid love affair between the kid from War Games and
Hey, I will not tolerate that. He's the kid from Biloxi Blues.
Okay, fine. The schmo from the producers. The not Nathan Lane of the producers. And you know, his estranged ex-girlfriend, and you got Mo Sislak running around with a camera. And you've got Harry Shearer basically playing. Well, shit! Pop my headset out. Well, he's Kent fucking Brockman. I mean, mildly amusing that Roland and Dean are so petty that they felt the need to insert a couple of unlikable New York politicians named Siskel and Ebert just because they shat on their previous movies. But this thing was so bland, so untrue to everything that the true King of the Monsters stood for, that Godzilla suit actor Kenpachiro Satsuma actually walked out of a 1998 convention screening muttering, "It's not Godzilla, it doesn't have his spirit." Toho felt so utterly jilted that Godzilla 2000 was immediately fast-tracked, first of all, because they felt the need to try to salvage their baby any way they possibly could. And then in 2001's Godzilla GMK, the following exchange happens between two government officials. One mutters to the other, "That was Godzilla, right?" And the other replies, "They say so in America, but not in Japan." Boom! And then, in what has got to be an unprecedented moment, in the legendary Godzilla Final Wars. For this movie, Toho purchased the rights to this specific version of Godzilla for one reason and one reason only. Number one, so they could rename it Zilla, which is the tag pretty much given to all non-Toho Godzilla knockoffs. But also, so that their OG Gojira could wreck him in mere seconds. We're talking bordering on Sheamus and Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 26, I believe, times. It was that freaking brutal. They just wanted this shit done. They wanted him out of the way. Folks, I realize that was the long way around, and I apologize that took a little bit longer than perhaps necessary. I normally try to keep these fairly brief. But, and I'm sure I'll have a chance to elaborate on this in my rebuttal in full. Folks, yeah, the defense can say all he wants to about how, it's really not that bad, and it would have been better received if it just hadn't been tagged as a Godzilla movie. And in many instances, I would be one to agree. I've used that defense myself regarding several movies. I said that about the first act and a half of Rob Zombie's Halloween. In fact, come to think about it, I've said that about a few Halloween movies, because I also said it about Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, that everybody would have been okay with it if nobody had tried to pass it off as a Halloween movie. But in this case, this wouldn't have even been a great kaiju movie, because these two schmucks, whose careers never fully recovered from this, clearly don't understand the appeal of that genre. You know, everything they shat on as being dopey was precisely what audiences wanted to see. It was exactly what they wanted to see. It's why, after Toho saw the finished product of Legendary Pictures, after they reluctantly agreed to partner up for that one, why they were all on board for creating another shared universe. It's why we just recently got Godzilla King of the Monsters. It's why in 2020 we're going to get a Godzilla vs. King Kong remake. It's because, to reflect on what Satsuma-san said, they understood Godzilla's spirit. They understood what makes him him, more than just a guy in a suit. You know, it wasn't this iguana on steroids that looks like it snuck into Brock Lesnar's gym bag and chowed down. You know, he was a massive creature that towered over everything around him, that stomped, breathed fire, decimated a city. Like I said, it made the city his playground. He wasn't fleeing in fear. He gave no shits whatsoever. I certainly don't think copping a squat and laying eggs on center court where the Knicks play was exactly on his agenda. No, the whole point of the first Godzilla movie was that he was decades of atomic karma come back to bite mankind squarely in the ass. You never get that feeling in this movie. You never get the feeling that he is basically the spirit of nuclear vengeance. You know, he's... I don't even want to call him a bull in a china shop. He's more like a big, derpy pit bull that you locked up in a bathroom full of fine china. And it's not even like he's mad. He's just panicking, having a spaz attack because he doesn't know any better. You know, you got the sense in the original movies that Godzilla just looked around him and decided, yeah, all of this, mine now. You go away. This belonged to Godzilla. You never get that impression here. Never, ever, 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 ever. You know, he's not a spirited noble combatant. He's not a beast of great might. He's somebody's frightened gecko. So the bigger problem is you had it right the first time, and you pretty much flushed it just because you didn't want to trust an unproven director who ultimately wanted less money than you ended up giving to the Independence Day guys. Folks, everybody involved in this movie, and Sony, I think he was saying that the Sony or TriStar executive Rob Fried even called it, and I'm not exaggerating here, the most egregious instance of corporate mishandling and incompetence he had ever seen. And he's right. He's right. Everybody deserves to be reminded of this. Again, I'm a big Face Off fan, and now I haven't caught up to the latest seasons. I'm still watching the old ones. There's like 14 seasons of this show. But assuming he's still a judge on the show, I am now hoping that somebody, when Patrick criticizes their makeup, will just go, bum, 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 bum. Or maybe just start humming, bum, 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 just to make a point. Really? You're going to crap on what a Hollywood legend in this industry wanted to do right by a cinematic legend? Dude, piss up the longest rope you can find. All right. Anyway, I'm now going to hand it over to you to try to defend this.
All right. A couple of things right off the bat. I'd like to submit for evidence the Wikipedia entry for Toho's Godzilla. Second paragraph of the overview. Godzilla is depicted as an enormous, destructive, prehistoric sea monster awakened and empowered by nuclear radiation. With the nuclear bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the Lucky Dragon 5 incident still fresh in the Japanese consciousness, Godzilla was conceived as a metaphor for nuclear weapons. Now let's go to the plot synopsis. In the beginning of the film, an iguana nest is exposed to the fallout of radiation following a military nuclear test in French Polynesia. In the South Pacific Ocean, a Japanese fishing vessel is suddenly attacked by an enormous sea creature with only one seaman surviving. Traumatized, he is questioned by a mysterious Frenchman in a hospital regarding what he saw, to which he only replies, Gojira. All right. Don't tell me that the American producers and filmmakers for the 98 Godzilla did not attempt to honor the source material. I just showed you where they are trying to make that link. And you can argue the success or failure of the strength of that leak, but to say that it's not there, I think is willful denial. It clearly is. Godzilla is the result of the nuclear bombs being dropped, the atom bombs being dropped in Japan. This one is the result of a military nuclear test in French Polynesia. The major difference being is that Godzilla is an unknown species. Gojira is an unknown species. It's described as a sea monster. And they wanted to root this in some degree of reality by making it a mutated iguana. Which I personally like. I get that not everybody likes that. But that's part of my defense of this movie, is that they were going for a modern Americanized interpretation of this Japanese metaphor for nuclear weapons. Which a better movie, I think, makes it work better. But the attacks on this movie has been that they didn't even try that at all, or that this is some sort of Godzilla in name only and that sort of thing. I think at its base, at its structure, they did a fairly decent job of creating an approximation of what they ultimately went for in Japan with the original Godzilla. Now, let's talk about, and defending this movie, I'm going to talk about some of what's wrong with it. And that might sound like a contradiction in terms, but stay with me here. this follows, like a lot of the other Roland Emmerich movies, there is some, what he specializes in, is disaster movies. I mean, ultimately, what was Independence Day? But in a disaster movie, but the disaster is caused by an alien attack. You have 2012, which, if I remember correctly, in that one, this is global warming.
Yeah, that was the John Cusack versus global warming movie.
Right. You have
Geostorm.
Right, Geostorm. So I'm looking at his list of movies here, and I don't see that one on there. I'm wondering if that was Dean Devlin.
What was the... Okay, well, this one I'm pretty sure was Roland's fault. What was it? It's something BC.
10,000 BC.
10,000. Yeah. The caveman versus saber-toothed tiger movie.
Right. So here's the structure for a lot of these movies, right? There is a disaster. It kind of just exists. It is a force of nature, not necessarily inherently bad, not necessarily inherently good. It just is, and it's just upended the lives of people who we're supposed to identify with. These are the point of view characters. Now, to us hoity, nerdy, soapbox standing, yelling at Disney for not giving us theme park tickets, shills. Sorry.
Wait. Sidebar. Yelled at Disney for not giving you theme park tickets.
Have you not seen the Christian Harloff thing on Collider?
No, I've not.
Oh, well, we'll talk later.
Oh, Jesus.
Just mute yourself and then go look up Christian Harloff Collider Meltdown. Then you'll know. But for all of us who are steeped in film and really examine this stuff, yeah, these characters don't work. They're shitty characters. They're poorly written. Matthew Broderick tries, but he can only stretch himself so far as an actor. He's working against probably one of the worst female leads in the history of cinema, Maria Patillo. Go ahead, read her Wikipedia page. It's hilarious. And then he's got the cast of The Simpsons with him, which are doing their level best, but nobody here is going to be working with Kenneth Branagh, in a Shakespearean tragedy anytime soon.
It's funny because I just realized when you talk about Maria Patillo, and I think about everybody, about how this cast includes, as much as I make fun of them, Matthew Broderick. Okay, he's done some things. Hank Azaria, Harry Shearer, Nancy Cartwright. Okay, without them, the Simpsons just isn't. And when I think of Maria Patillo, I'm reminded of one of my favorite Marge Simpson lines in the entire series. She just goes, "Well, we love Bart."
Yeah, that's one of the standards here on the Rattlegion Broadcasting Network. We say that all. Robert and I use that one a lot. It's right up with I was the author of all your pain, James. Anyway, so look, the rest of the movie-going world, and I don't know if people who listen to podcasts like these realize this, but we share the world, and they make up the majority of the movie-going audience. It's not us. It's not us nerds. It's not us toxic fans. It's not us podcasters. We are the minority. We are the vocal. We are the podcasty, blogging, petitioning minority. The most of the movie-going audience likes dopes in their movie. I don't know how else to explain it. They're okay with the vast majority of dopey characters to identify with and follow and fret for when they're in the face of danger and cheer for when they finally conquer it. They're not looking for deep, complex, layered characters. I in my experience, call it what you will, in talking to people outside of the blogosphere, outside of the YouTube verse, outside of my own damn network, which is why I try not to do it anymore, but nonetheless, the feedback that I get from most of these people, and I've been doing this for years now, because go figure, people want to talk to me about movies at work, is that they're going to the movies as a distraction from their lives, and they want to be entertained, and they don't want to think about things, and they don't really want to have to strain to follow the movie. And that is where this one excels. These are dopey, one-dimensional, poorly written, entertaining characters. They are Christmas tree lights. They're pretty to look at.
Well, they are dim bulbs.
They don't do much of anything else. They are there to dress up the tree that is Godzilla. And that, I think, this movie is largely successful at, is giving the general audience a cast of characters to follow and enjoy, and then summarily forget about. Again, this was not meant to be a time capsule piece. This was meant to be a summer popcorn blockbuster. It was meant to make money, and it did. Not a lot of money, but it, made its budget. What more can you ask for? Let's talk about the actual Godzilla here. Okay? Good old Zilla. Yes, I understand, especially now having seen the 2014 Godzilla. I can't speak to the Toho movies. I haven't seen them. Check out our source material. Listen to Evan Bevins go on ad nauseum talking about the spirit of Godzilla and all of that. And, I think Justin Thomas, I believe, was also on that show. And again, huge Godzilla fans. And so they are steeped in the Toho universe. And that's fine. And I certainly don't take that away from them. I'm not, and I can't really speak to it. But I can speak to the 2014 Godzilla when you saw him on screen. And I got what people perceived to be classic Godzilla and why this one doesn't match that. On the other hand, and Sean mentioned it before, and was like, oh, you can't really apply that defense here. Well, I'm going to anyway, because I really do think it works here. And that is, let me back up a second. There's an argument that says when a character is written, that is the way the character must be portrayed always and forever. And if you make a significant enough change to that character is no longer purely that character anymore. You've turned it into something else. Various iterations of Superman are not the way the character was drawn and written in the golden age of action comics. We've had a variety of iterations of Superman. We've had a variety of iterations of Batman. We've had a variety of iterations of Spider-Man. So the counter argument is that these characters grow stale and old and boring and useless if you don't evolve them in some way. And I look at the personalities of real people. At 43 years old, I am not the same as I was 33, that I was 23, that I was 13. I would tell you Sean would say the same thing. I would tell you the people around us wouldn't say the same thing, that we change over time, our personalities change over time. Maybe sometimes fundamentally. There are things that happen in this world that can change us. And so you have characters, and I'll go back to Superman here. Why not take an interpretation of Superman in a different direction and challenge the reader, challenge the audience to accept the story being told that these people are, passionate about and think is an interesting idea. Now apply that to Godzilla, which is a strange thing because Godzilla, not Superman, obviously. But, Godzilla is presented a certain way in the Toho films. The American producers and writers and directors of this thing saw Godzilla, ultimately, differently. Wanted to do something different with the story. That instead of it being sort of this thinking, mythical type being that oftentimes acts as a protector of humanity, and that's certainly the current iteration of Godzilla. What if it's just an animal? Why can't it be just an animal? And that's what they're going for here. The prosecution says this several times. It's a scared lizard. But why can't it be? Why can't Godzilla just be an animal? And if you then take that to its next step. Now you've got a movie where you have this large animal acting on its instinct as animals do in in a hostile environment where they're shooting missiles at the damn thing. If you just take that story, this is actually done really well. The CGI is pretty good. I mean, some of it looks like they kind of took the old CGI from Jurassic Park and just retooled it a bit. But ultimately, you know, if they looked at Jurassic Park and saw that it made $1 billion or whatever it made and was like, people seem to like dinosaurs running around stomping buildings. What else do we got in the old trunk? Well, we've got Godzilla. Well, what if we made him a dinosaur? Cool.
Fuck.
I mean, I can see that happening around the writer's room table. You know, producers on a conference call going, we have this IP just sitting here collecting dust. What can we do with it? I don't know. Jurassic Park was a thing. Let's do that. And so you may not like that idea, but the question is not whether or not you like it. It's whether or not it worked on film. And this largely does. There are problems with the film. It's too long. There's a little too much with the point of view characters. They do the same gag with the piles of fish one too many times.
That's a lot of fish.
It's a lot of fish. There's...
It's a Godzilla movie about feeding Godzilla tuna.
the bit with the baby Godzillas was probably misplaced, so we have some plotting. Like I said, it's not a perfect movie. But, you know, it could use some editing. It could use some scene restructuring. Some scenes kind of need to be shifted around. Even the producers of this thing, Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich, who directed and produced this thing, had said that they put the point of view characters too far into the movie before you really got a chance to get to know them and identify with them. You know, by that point, it was too late, and I largely agree with that. But I think if you're just strictly looking at, does this monster running around, this animal running around a city, trumping and stomping, evoke fear? I believe it does. Do the action scenes evoke intensity, suspense, tension? I believe it succeeds in all of those things. You know, this iteration of Godzilla or Ham Sandwich or whatever you want to call it so that you can get through the movie without wanting to punch the person next to you. I think does a really, really good job of being of being an on-screen menace and something you want to see defeated. You want to see it taken down. I mean, ultimately, it's killing people and wrecking buildings and causing astronomical amounts of damage. You can't live with it. There's no Isla de Mar or whatever the fuck the name of the island's called that they can put this thing on. It's got to go. There goes Tokyo. So, letting go of our presumptions that this has to be a strict interpretation of the Japanese Toho Godzilla and just accepting it as a monster film with a mutated iguana, and accepting that these characters are there to interact and run from and quip funnily, as they're running from the dinosaur. All those things work. They were done pretty well. Could use a bit of editing, but overall, it was a nice, fun summer popcorn feature. And for some of you, that's not your bag, but that is not the charge that this movie has been brought up on. And so I submit to the jury that Godzilla is not guilty of being a poorly crafted, poorly structured film. The defense rests.
Okay, let's wrap this up. First of all, to the argument that, well, this is just typical Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin. This is once more a case in which filmmakers have shown in the past that they're capable of more imagination and just got lazy.
Hang on.
Hang
on, I got to object to that. This guy,
What?
Roland Emmerich's filmography as a director. Let's see. We got Independence Day, okay, Godzilla. Then there's The Patriot, Eight-Legged Freak, Cellular, Flyboys, Independence Day, Resurgence. Okay, Geos. Sorry,
You done, Funshine Bear?
No, read the wrong column. I'm in the producer column. Sorry.
Because you forgot one. Stargate.
Never saw it.
Stargate.
I can't speak to it.
Harold, you beat the History Channel to the punch by a good couple of decades with the premise of Kurt Russell and James Spader travel through a mysterious structure and discover that ancient Egypt was guided by aliens. You got creative and outside of the box, and when you did that, what you ended up fostering was something that turned into a franchise and a lasting fandom and multiple spin-off TV series. And the launch of fucking Khal Drago's career.
I got the list in front of me now. I want to make this point because you're absolutely right. Stargate precedes Godzilla, but after Godzilla, again, Patriots, The Day After Tomorrow, the aforementioned 10,000 BC, which I understand sucked diddlyucks, 2012, White House Down, Independence Day Resurgence, and oh boy, coming soon to a damn you Hollywood near you this year, Midway. I can only imagine how that one's going to go, and I can't wait to make Rob go see it.
Yes, I agree. But the thing is, up to this point, they had shown that they were able to get legitimately creative and do something far much more than what they would eventually start coasting on. And, you know, when you start coasting on something, it should usually be on something good and not the mediocre by the numbers disaster schlock that they ended up churning out. So that's the first issue. Is Roland and Dean, you got lazy. You went lazy with it. You had the nerve to say this was dopey when, again, Ancient Aliens, the movie, starring James Spader and Kurt Russell. You did that. You gave us that. You built that. So that's the first problem. The second problem is the notion that it's somehow impossible to suffuse these characters with a personality and a presence all their own other than swole up pet iguana, run loose. You know, Godzilla had a presence. In these movies, what he developed first into a threat and then into somewhat of a reluctant ally of mankind. I would also point to Gamera. They gave him his own mythos as a protector of the Earth. Not of humanity, but of the Earth. You know, he had his misgivings about his humans. He had so much personality, MST3K gave him a song. Gamera.
Okay.
Gamera.
Gamera
is really neat. Gamera is filled with turtle meat. Gamera is filled with meat. We've been eating Gamera.
So I want to throw this out there. This is an audience review. Now, granted, their audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is 28%. Not a strong argument from my point of view. But I want to read this because this is hilarious to me. This movie may be disappointing to some, but growing up, it was an amazing film that combined Godzilla films with the beauty of Jurassic Park. Mm-hmm.
No, it fucking did.
I love every act. Whilst there are some cheesy moments in the acting department, and the CGI isn't where it should have been. It's a Godzilla movie. It's supposed to be cheesy. I recommend this for people who want to sit down and watch a fun movie. See, this person gets it.
No, this person has never seen a Toho Godzilla movie. And again, the monster does not feel like a threat. Okay, let's compare it to, say, Peter Jackson's King Kong, which is a movie that had its problems. But you have to admit, it got Kong himself right.
Open this up, please.
Kong was the beast that the humans intruded upon. It didn't come after them. No, it just decided it had had enough of their shit and decided to show them once and for all, y'all are not the apex primates on this rock. Okay? You know, they backed him into a corner and he took his revenge.
Godzilla, 7 out of 10. Godzilla or someone pretending to be Godzilla attacks New York. And only Matthew Broderick and the French Secret Service can save the Big Apple. This is not the worst Godzilla film ever made, not by a long shot.
Moving on. You never get the feeling that this creature is that much of necessarily a threat on par with what Godzilla is supposed to be. Again, it spends most of the movie fleeing. It spends most of the movie running away. It's this concept of destruction would be like if I were to go over to Alexis and Andre's house tonight, and if Alexis were maybe working on a bunch of jewelry on the floor, and I were to all of a sudden start running around, chasing Eddie and Toby, flailing my arms and screaming, "Unga bunga, unga bunga, unga bunga!" Yeah, they would go running. Yeah, they would go running all through her work and messing everything up. But at no point would you ever feel like you were in imminent danger.
I object to that. In 2019, someone might actually shoot you with a missile.
Like you're actually supposed to when confronted with something you have the cojones to call fucking Godzilla.
Okay. Time for more reader reactions. Since the original Godzilla is way before my time, I'm pretty loyal to the 98 version. This person gave it 4.5 stars. Take that. I love this movie, and despite the terrible lighting, it's horribly dark throughout the movie. Unsmiley face. I think this Godzilla is much better than the original. The Japanese original was cheesy and unappealing to me. I couldn't even get through 10 minutes of the original. Instead of looking like a mutated lizard, looks more like a fat guy in a mutant teddy bear suit. I know it's from the 50s, though. I think the 90s Godzilla was more believable. This is my point, Sean. I feel like one of us is talking to the Toho traditionalists, and the other one of us is talking to everybody else.
Look, you wanted me to prosecute this thing, and I'm earnestly prosecuting it, okay? And the fact is, yes, the original, it does look cheesy by modern standards. However, what you have to admire about that is the fact that it combined not only, number one, making the monster feel like a threat within the context of the story, because Godzilla was there to stake his claim to that territory. He wasn't running away because he was confused or scared or had a little too much tuna and had to go make poopy. He was there to take over and take out anything in his path. Again, he was atomic karma. You never really got the feeling. You always have the feeling that it's only a matter of time before this particular creature is brought down once and for all. That is what you're left with. Is Godzilla in this is not a force of nature so much as he is just a stranger in a strange land. You know, he's an elephant rampaging in a preschool.
But I go back to but who cares? Like, you know, if you walked into the movie because it said Godzilla, but if you forgot that was the name of the movie and you enjoyed yourself, the film is a success.
I didn't really enjoy it all that much though. And again, you want to talk about a movie being dopey. Most of this movie is spent with the doofus from the Stepford Wives remake running around with the cast of The Simpsons, making a bunch of lame ass jokes, trying to tell a half-assed love story, when really all we want to see is more of the monster wrecking shit.
This is the last one I'm going to read, and I find there's a thread going through these that I think is hilarious, and it just makes my night. This is a remake that is better than the original. This is this is the best Godzilla movie. This has got to be the best. These have got to be the best science. Fuck me. Okay, that's not my fault. This is poorly written. This has got to be the best science fiction movie I have ever seen. See it. It will blow your mind. Look,
Sir, can I buy some pot from you?
Look, I get it doesn't do anything for you, and I understand your line of logic in prosecuting this, but you cannot deny my central argument, which is the vast majority of people who don't think about this stuff too hard love this movie, and some of those people, this is the first Godzilla they've seen, so there's a sentimental attachment to it.
Even if I shut my brain off, I'm still going to enjoy a classic Toho Godzilla movie multitudes more than I am ever going to enjoy this one. Because, it takes work to actually suffuse something with enough personality and again, as Satsuma said, in a kind of spirit that it actually endures for as long as it does. Yeah, Godzilla is a joke butt here, but you got to keep in mind, before he was a joke butt here, he became this national pop culture icon in Japan. This beloved character. And I guess I shouldn't be too surprised that an American distributor gets a hold of a foreign property and absolutely misses the point entirely, because after all, I am a Doctor Who fan. And half human on my mother's side. Never say that to a true Whovian. Just don't. Unless you have Anderson Silva like head movement and can run really, really fast. We don't talk about the TV movie. But there's just so little to be said to defend the fact that this thing exists. Again, especially since you had people who got what appeals not just to Japanese audiences, but what appealed to American audiences about classic Godzilla, and were clearly intent on trying to deliver their own next level version of that. Now, we'll never know if it will necessarily be any good, because obviously it never happened. Jan de Bont couldn't get his budget. Roland and Dean threw out Stan Winston's designs and decided to go their own way. They decided to toss away a script made by two people who later went on to write one of the greatest Hollywood adventure epics of all time. They just made every ridiculous wrong move that they possibly could have. So it's just that I'm out of things to say. I'm running out. I'm running so far out of counterpoints, except to also point out that this movie would teach lessons that Michael Bay would eventually not learn before making Transformers.
Which would all go on to make billions of dollars, except for the last one. and be a joy and a treasure to everybody except Robert Winfrey.
You know what? I have heard that Bumblebee is good, and it gives me hope that the Transformers movies that follow will be just as good as I've heard Bumblebee is.
So next week we're doing X-Men 3, The Last Stand, and we're doing that because of the Dark Phoenix movie, and they both share that thread. X-Men 3 drew partially from the Dark Phoenix saga, though it wasn't obviously a strict adaptation. Dark Phoenix, I think, gets closer to the mark, but only so much you can do.
You know
with
what?
story.
I can sum X-Men: The Last Stand up with one of Bruce Buffer's announcer lines from his voice pack in Smite. Hey, you tried!
Well, the point that I was getting to was when I'm picking up, just kind of scanning through these audience reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, just as a place to sort of pick up some of the opinions that I was alluding to in my argument, and that is people who grew up with the '98 Godzilla and really had no frame of reference to this day still like the movie. Again, I don't need to rehash my entire argument again, but there's something about, hey, I grew up with this thing that means a lot to me, and they're not being tremendously critical of it. And so now we have an issue with Dark Phoenix, which we'll talk about more next week. I don't want to get into it now, but Dark Phoenix failing critically, possibly failing financially, at least in the U.S. Maybe in foreign markets it may be doing better. I'm getting mixed signals from the rags on it. But I guarantee you, as much vitriol as X-Men 3 produced in its time because of the shitty way it adapted the Dark Phoenix saga, that if you go back to the kids who watched it, if you go back to the adults who watched it when they were children, and you said, go watch Dark Phoenix, and then rewatch X-Men 3, tell me which one you like better, I guarantee you most of them would say X-Men 3. And it's not because X-Men 3 is a better movie than Dark Phoenix. It may or may not be. God, I don't know how much worse it could be. But
I'm being a little bit of a snarky bastard and possibly a little bit too harsh, because there are things about The Last Stand that I like.
Mm-hmm.
That's
also the name of this game, right? Is we take a side and we take it to an extreme. But in earnest, I think that the '98 Godzilla and X-Men 3, it's funny we're doing them back to back, the commonality that they share is that the adults who watch them or who knew the source material hate them, though the children who watch them, the average moviegoer who watch them who are not familiar with the source material and don't particularly care, love them. And I think that that makes them at least worthy of discussion. And that's what we'll do next week when we just talk about X-Men 3.
Right.
That being said, not guilty. No, I'm just kidding. I really wish we had a judge on this show. The only judge I truly think would be impartial would be Robert Winfrey, but then I'd lose every single one of my cases. All right, Sean, tell them what you got going on in your world.
All right. Well, good news and bad news. The bad news is I had a very special stream planned for this weekend, a 12-hour charity stream. Was going to go on this Sunday, but that has got to be put off a little bit because this is going to be the last time Jet Cub is going to be with us for a couple weeks due to her new summer schedule with her dad. And so instead, we're having a date day with her and her boyfriend. Good news being, 1 week from this Sunday is when I will be doing it, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. at twitch.tv/Comer Codex. I'll tell you to go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Comer Codex for updates on what charity exactly we're supporting. I will go into detail there. I will say that it is mostly going to be an Overwatch stream that I'm calling the Quest for the Golden Guns. I need 63 more wins by last count to buy my first golden gun. I have a rule, no golden guns for any hero with whom I do not have 200 competitive wins. And my main, Sombra, is currently sitting at 137. I'm going to play a little comp between now and then, see if I can pare that down, but the idea is I want to see if in 12 hours I can get up to that magic number so that I can buy the weapon, and all the while I'm going to try to set up some incentives for anybody who wants to donate to a couple of very worthy causes. I will be talking about those on Twitter over the coming week as they come together, but in the meantime, yeah, I would just generally appreciate your support. That is my next scheduled stream. Of course, sometimes I just get a wild hair up my ass and I decide that I want to kill a few hours on the weekend. So all the more reason to follow me is because that's usually where about an hour before I go live, I try to announce what I'm going to be playing and when I'm going to be going on. And I've also got another Rodelich and Broadcasting Network podcast, guaranteed to probably offend some of you in the near future. I'm fleshing it out. It's going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be necessarily a review show, but more of a discussion format. I want to take happenings in the geek and nerd communities and try to use them to frame bigger discussions about these silly little subcultures of ours and what they sometimes mean.
I have a question. Are you going to demand Disney give you a free pass to Galaxy's Edge because you've been shilling for Star Wars movies? Because that seems to be a thing now.
I ain't demanding shit from anybody because I will get J. Jonah Jameson style laughed out of any room if I so much as ask for a little extra cheese on my Whopper. That's about how low tier I am. But yeah, toxic fandoms is one.
Can you give me a minute? I'm almost done, and then I'm all yours.
Oh, I thought you were talking to me for a second.
No. My son came bursting in the room. I don't know. Hang on, Sean. Yes, Jonas, come here. How can I help you, sir?
There's a way to make whoopee cushions longer by using something that we already have.
Okay, you'll have to show me what you're doing with the whoopee cushion when we're done.
Yes, this needs to be a podcast. I need to learn more about this.
Well, we'll get my son on the Practical Jokes podcast soon.
Yeah, that's like the Practical Jokes equivalent to the anti-life equation. But yeah, I've got some things that are almost always rolling around my head. The deep thoughts that I ponder, in traffic while I'm working throughout the day about stuff that nobody should really be thinking about all that deeply. I admit. That's coming soon. As soon as I nail down a co-host, get a quick tech tutorial from Mark, I would say look for that sometime a little bit later this summer.
All right. It's been Godzilla week all week long. We did a commentary starring my children, for what that's worth, last Friday. Last Saturday, we did a commentary for Anthony Joshua versus Mexican Rocky, Andy Ruiz Jr., our new boxing world champion. Check it out. The four podsmen got together and reviewed NXT TakeOver. It was better than AEW. That's all you need to know.
Wow.
Source Material did Kingdom of Monsters. Damn You Hollywood, we did King of Monsters. Jesse finally got to pick an album this week. He picked one of his favorite bands, Allegion, for all you technical death metal fans. The new album, Apoptosis. Nothing this weekend. We start fresh again on Monday with the Dark Phoenix saga. I will not be on that podcast, but you can check out Jesse and his guest for that show. Myself, Robert Winfrey, and Alexis Hano will review Dark Phoenix, the last of the Red Hot Fox X-Men films. We have come to the end of an era. Robert Winfrey will be guesting on Metal Hammer of Doom because we're talking Nettle Band, Oakley Dokley. Their second album, Howdly Toodly. And then the aforementioned On Trial X-Men 3, The March of the 90s, The Last Stand. Wait, no, that was the 2000s. Never mind. Close enough. We'll be doing an on trial for X-Men 3, The Last Stand. Sean will resume prosecuting. I will resume defending. And I will try to come up with a different argument then. Well, if you don't call it by its name, it's fine. Let's see. Nothing for the weekend. But The following week, we've got a special request from our Canadian office, Andrew Graham. He can't be on the show because of personal stuff, but in his honor and in his stead, we're going to look at Gotham Central, Book 1, In the Line of Duty. We've got a Damn You Hollywood from Men in Black International. We've got the new Rammstein album. And then all of us Rattleton Broadcasting Network hosts and co-hosts are going to get together on the Screaming Boy podcast and talk demanding Disney give you Galaxy... No, we're going to talk toxic fandoms. Toxic fandoms.
Do you have room for one more on that show?
I have room for anyone that wants to be on it.
When is it again?
June 20th.
Okay, do not let me forget. I definitely want to be on that one.
I will send you reminders. The week of the 24th, we've got Heroes in Crisis because fuck Tom King. We've got Toy Story 4, the new Amon Amoth, and then myself and Jesse Starcher are going to review the new Black Mirror Season 5. And then finally, Chris Bailey. We've got Jessica Jones Volume 2, The Secrets of Maria Hill, and then the last of the red-hot Netflix Marvel TV shows, Jessica Jones Season 3. And then on July 3rd, the last show, probably before I go in the hospital to receive my CAR-T treatment. Oh, boy. We're going to review the new Upon a Burning Body on the Metal Hammer of Doom. And that's all the news that's fit to print. Court is now in recess. Sean, thank you for joining me once again.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Be well, be safe, and behave.